How's it going, guys? So, following up here on the Ruthless Aggression series, the season 2 is out. I reviewed the Rock's episode, Hollywood Rock. If you haven't checked that one out, go take a look. It was a great episode in my opinion. I thought that it was a nice little montage. Not really a lot of ground to cover there. It was kind of something that was very over and done with rather fast, but they did a good job of covering it like in like 42 minutes or whatever it was. But here we've got innovations, and this episode is, something that walks us through all the different things that were brought to the table during the Ruthless Aggression era. And when we kind of look, there are a lot of things to this day that they have definitely kept. This was definitely an era, like I said, much like the Attitude Era. It's an era that is quite beloved. Um, it's definitely, in my opinion, not as good as the Attitude Era, which kind of says something because the Attitude Era was much shorter than the Ruthless Aggression Era. And whether you want to know where it begins and where those eras starts is kind of debatable. Like the opinion of where the Attitude Era stopped, it's kind of a little bit obvious that we know where it began, somewhere to mid late 1997. But and we know where the Ruthless Aggression Era began, but there was really no in between. And I don't really think it began when there was sort of like an in-between where there was some kind of transitional months between Attitude Era and Ruthless Aggression Era. Some people make like it just dove right into it, but there's this like weird like white space where like I don't even know what you would call it, and that would be like Survivor Series 2001. That's kind of like where I say that the Attitude Era sort of ended, in my opinion. Like after that pay-per-view went off the air, I kind of just say that that's where it ended. That's just my opinion, but whatever. So we talk about the Ruthless Aggression era and all the different match types it brought to the table, and it definitely did. We talk about the Elimination Chamber and how it was definitely a big change from the Hell in the Cell. And we talk about that first match, which in my opinion, that is undoubtedly still the best Elimination Chamber match to this date. It really is. It's just like, just look at the level of competition you had in there. The competitors: Triple H, Rob Van Dam, Shawn Michaels, Booker T, Chris Jericho. It's just a phenomenal set of. Did I say Kane? I think I did, but anyway, I don't think I did. But just the level of talent in there. There's only like so many other names that were in the company at the time that were not in that match. And that was just, you could say maybe Kurt Angle or Brock Lesnar, were not in that match, but, you had just amazing talent in there. And of course, it's infamous for the injury that Triple H sustained. And I will say, just like his match on Raw in 2001 with Jericho and Benoit, where he finished after tearing his quadricep muscle. We could say what we want about Triple H, but the guy is a phenomenal competitor. I don't like the way how the guy is now, and kind of the level of talent that he's brought to the table is not good. But as far as being a worker and a wrestler, I think that the guy is he's amazing. You look at his body of work and you step back and you forget about all the politics and everything. This guy has really done some great work. Did they go overboard with him in some places? You bet your ass that they did. Probably more than anyone else. I think, people like to complain about John Cena, but I think Triple H was kind of the reason. Look at this. Shawn Michaels won that match, and the title was off of him the very next month. And I've talked about this in the past, not really in depth, but to me, it was so weird to me that Shawn Michaels came back after all these years. We thought that Michaels was done, like his back was so messed up that he couldn't return. And when he came back at SummerSlam this same year in 2002, it was incredible. The fact that this was his only world title win really makes this match feel special to me. And it's just amazing that he would wrestle all the way into 2010 with very few breaks in between, like a few months here and a few months there. But the guy, like, one world title run for a fucking month, and that was it. And it's, like, incredible that I don't know, after all the Mania main events he was in, and all, the main events that he was in, like, a truckload of fucking main events, wrestled Triple H so many times in, like, classic matches, and, it just ended up kind of going nowhere in the end. And I mean, you can make the argument, did Shawn need the title? And no, I guess he didn't. He was already over, so he doesn't really need that prop to help him. But, it's sort of just like a thing that I guess you would do. But, maybe that's just the stuff that's been drilled into our head by some of the idiots on the internet that, that wrestler needs to win the belt. But it's not really about that, but it just kind of fits into the Elimination Chamber and my memories of it. Obviously they had many other good chamber matches. For some reason, it's just nostalgia, but the chamber matches just don't have the same oomph to them. It also doesn't help that what they mentioned, like later on, which I kind of didn't even notice this, they made the chamber more user-friendly for high spots. Like, half the charm of the chamber, and it kind of feels weird using that word, but, like, the fact that Rob Van Dam couldn't properly do his move, the 5-star frog splash off the top of the pod because it wasn't shaped correctly. Well, I understand that he injured Triple H and all that, but I think wrestlers also jumped off of it in other ways. Jeff Hardy and others, and, Mysterio found ways. But now there's, like, a nice, clean, flat surface for them. It's so nice that they took the time to, make this a safe elimination chamber. I mean, by mentioning that, to me, that kind of just showed, like, oh, man, they just need to get rid of that match already. I mean, honestly... And the same thing goes for, like, the outside of the chamber. Like, they change it. Like, it's no longer, like, a metal surface. It's just a mat now. It's, like, the safest chamber of all time. Kind of losing the sight of what the Elimination Chamber is supposed to be. Definitely has outworn its welcome. Then we talk about the Money in the Bank match. And, I'm not sure if I'm getting these all in order, but that's not really the point. I'm just going to address pretty much everything that they talked about here. The Money in the Bank match, like, the first one was the best. The first one was the best. Now, you could also make arguments there were some other good Money in the Banks, and, they talk about how Edge, this is an interesting thing. Also, it's going to get a lot of controversy. Maybe this is where Jericho kind of started getting a little bit angry, where he said he wasn't getting the credit he deserved for Money in the Bank, because they said he collaborated with Brian Jurwitz. And, I also looked at something about the year that Jurwitz was, like, on duty. Like, can you believe that this guy was still on the writing team in 2012? Like, this guy had some really good ideas. I understand there was many others, but he was the head writer. I'm not even sure if we have a head writer nowadays, but we had a head writer back then. So, what happened to all his ideas? Like, did he just seriously go bankrupt somewhere? Because I feel like, is it me, or did, like, storylines just kind of go out the window somewhere around 2008, 2009? And you just only had little bits and pieces of storylines from that point on. Like, the long-running storyline stuff, like, just kind of stopped. And we no longer had these larger-than-life feuds. And that's another debatable point. Like, let me know in the comments below. When do you think, like, wrestling kind of abandoned the storyline as, like, its most useful tool? because I would say it's somewhere around that period. Definitely 2012, which in my opinion was like, I thought it was a pretty bad year. You could go back, and I mean, I don't really agree with former Brad, like on this channel. You go back and some of the stuff, like on my earlier videos on here, I don't really agree with what I said back then. Now, don't get me wrong, none of this stuff was really that amazing, but there was some stuff I think I was harsh and didn't give credit to, and I probably should have, but then again, you know what? Maybe I was right. It wasn't like anything was really worth defending to begin with, but I also had a different perspective on wrestling, and I don't know. I was also just angrier back then about stuff, and now I just don't really get upset anymore. It's just because it's not fucking worth it. Anyway, talk about how Money in the Bank is now like a present day thing, like still to this day, and it has its own pay-per-view, and that's pretty much where they killed it. If they just kept this a once a year thing at WrestleMania, yeah, it would become a tiresome thing. Like, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Everything with the exception of the Royal Rumble, everything being like every single year doing it this way, it's tiresome. Like, there's just like some tropes that they need to get rid of, because if they're not doing it good anymore and they're not doing it justice, now if every single year is a knockout success, then I say keep going with it. But it's quite honest that, like, I noticed, like, reviewing these things, like the Money in the Bank, like, after a while, like, we're not really doing anything different, and they're kind of just okay. And even if I say, like, they're good and there's a good match and they're great, like, we forget about, like, the Money in the Bank from this year. I remember, like, one spot from Ricochet, and the rest of it kind of just, I forgot about it. Because there was nothing leading up to that match. We look back at the first Money in the Bank, and we see all the competitors in there: Benoit, Jericho, Edge, Kane. Everyone had a problem with Edge. There was different feuds going on within that match. It made it very interesting and compelling, and also the level of competitors that were in there was just flat out phenomenal. And then they say that they turned it into its own pay-per-view. Same thing with the Chamber, but they've been more consistent with Money in the Bank. I mean, it's just, they gotta just kill that pay-per-view already. It's so lame just having a pay-per-view named that very thing. Like, you just didn't have that back in the day. What was a Survivor Series will have the Survivor Series matches, right? King of the Ring will have the King of the Ring tournament. Royal Rumble will have the Royal Rumble match. I get it. But, like, calling a whole pay-per-view like that match, I don't know what it is. It's hard to explain, but it does not feel right. And ever since they've been doing it, it's just become a tiresome chore. And now the fact that we have to watch two of everything is just mind-numbing to me. Like, it just kills the match night, because we have to have one for the women, one for the men, and I'm just so sick of it. Raw Roulette. This is something that they've only done sometimes, and I'm kind of surprised they haven't gone back to it again. But this was really fun. I remember watching this episode of Raw because it was the day before my birthday. I kind of just remembered that when they showed the date of the episode. And I remember I was so happy when I found out that I was going to go to the WWE restaurant, which wasn't actually called WWF New York at this point, or WWE New York. They changed it to the World. I think once they turned it to WWE, that is when they decided to start calling it the World, which to me was always a weird name change for me. Like, the World, like, okay, this is not the world. This is a restaurant. And why they would refer to it as, like, the very planet we're on, like, I don't get it. I know it's just a name, but I remember being so happy that, we had, like, tickets to go that night, and I was like, oh, man. And I got to see the TLC match that was planned. It was just very exciting. And that was a really good match, and just a very fun episode of Raw. Definitely one of the best episodes in 2002, and maybe one of the best episodes of the Ruthless Aggression era when I really think about it. Just a lot of fun stuff like the blindfold match. Yeah, the Regal thing is just weird, but it is hilarious. I remember laughing a lot at and Goldust, classic stuff, and just a lot of other memorable things throughout that night. Taboo Tuesday and Cyber Sunday. These were fun pay-per-views. I mean, I remember really getting into it and voting on WWE.com, and I strictly remember that, believe it or not, I wanted to see something like fun. So in that Intercontinental title match, I actually did not vote for Shelton or Batista. I remember voting for Chuck Palumbo because, I don't know, I always liked him and just wanted to see him get an opportunity. And I remember I was kind of mad that he never got to like wrestle on an episode of Raw. He was like only had a match against Benoit on Heat, and that's just a random memory. I'm even surprised I can remember that so well. But I remember being excited for this pay-per-view. And I think it delivered. Like, I remember really enjoying Snitsky and Kane, the Shawn Michaels and Triple H match where Shawn was, like, working with, like, a kayfabe bad leg. And just a general, like, enjoyable match. A great Divas match. I remember this is the one where they all dressed up as schoolgirls and they gave... they didn't really, like, run through all the choices, but it was definitely a memorable pay-per-view. I remember also after getting the network, finally checking out the 2005 one, which I had never seen, and that was also really good, too. Good. I think the first one was probably the best. It was that one just kind of, maybe because it's, like, the first, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it a lot. I kind of wish that they would still kind of do this stuff. I remember people arguing about the first one, like, was it rigged or was it not? And, I kind of don't think it was rigged for some reason. Like, it kind of made sense that Shelton Benjamin would win this. And they did talk about how it was surprising that they were expecting Batista to win this. So that kind of made me sit back and think, like, okay, well, like, knowing Vince, he probably would have wanted Batista to win, but then again, Shelton was also built up quite a bit, and at this point, he had already pinned Triple H on Raw, and there was a lot of other factors. So I would go with the fact that they didn't want, that they didn't want certain people to win, but they actually just kind of let the fans have the poll the way they wanted. Because I remember there was things like with the Snitsky match, like, people didn't vote for the lead pipe. They think they voted for the chair, and he ended up using the pipe anyway. So they got around doing what they wanted to anyway. And then they talked about bad ideas. And, like, this one was kind of hilarious to me. Because the Concrete Crypt match, I actually watched that one, like, about a year ago. And it was actually, like, not a bad match, and I thought it was, like, a kind of fun but zany concept. Definitely not one of the best matches, but, I don't know, The Undertaker versus the Dudleys, it was a good match, and I enjoyed it, and it was memorable. I mean, I think that it was carried out pretty well, the way how it was done. I mean, you could say it's stupid, it's far-fetched, but, hey, it's, like, old school Undertaker with the lightning bolts and shit like that. So can we really be that critical of it? And then they talked about, to me, this was funny. They were criticizing the Punjabi Prison match as it being like a bad idea and it was awkward. And then they fucking went ahead and they did it in 2017 with Jinder Mahal and Randy Orton. So, guys, if it was a bad idea and you didn't like the way it played out back in 2006, like, why did you go ahead and do it again? Quite frankly, I think it's an interesting looking match type. It definitely has, like, that Kennel from Hell vibe to it where it's, like, 2 cages, and I kind of like that, but I don't know, like, I just found that funny. Like, here we are criticizing something that we actually ended up doing again years later. And then they also talked about Bite This, which I gotta be honest, like, that was a show that I never really watched because when it was going on, I had dial up. So I never really got to experience that show without having to wait a long time. I remember I gave it like a few goes here and there, and I don't know. I can never really get into it. Like, not every show was as good as what they were showing. They definitely showed the best of Bite This, but for the most part, it was kind of fluffy because I remember like going through it, like they'd get phone calls. I remember the only time I really checked something out from there is when one goof. It kind of reminded me of the AEW crowd called in and said like, "Oh, TNA, TNA, TNA," and he just said it over and over. And I remember Todd Grisham like told the guy like he's an idiot or something. But whatever. Enjoyable episode. I mean, I gotta say, like, I don't really have anything bad to say about this. There's definitely rewriting history, and you know, everyone's like gonna say their like own thing about like this and that about you know, this is the way it's supposed to be, that's the way it's supposed to be. But hey, you know, and I also learned something new on this show. Speaking of the Money in the Bank, Edge saying that he did not want to be a part of the Money in the Bank match because he didn't want to be known as the ladder match guy. And I had completely forgotten that that guy had been absent from WrestleMania since 2002. Yeah, if you remember, he got injured at the beginning of 2003, wasn't there for 2004, and then he you know, this was the one where he came back at. So that was pretty interesting, but he decided, you know, when he learned that the concept was actually good. And it's kind of funny that he said, like, I would actually sit out that Mania. I don't know how true that story is. I don't know how much embellishing it is, like, to kind of just play up a fact, you know, like, oh, I might have not been in this match. You know, they sort of sometimes do that shit. Like, I'm just so used to hearing this stuff online. Like, you hear the same story, and each time, like, the story changes from, like, the same wrestler, and to me, I like always roll my eyes, which is kind of like why I roll my eyes at this even sometimes, but it's enjoyable. I like this era, and I don't know, it's a fun bullshit show, and it's entertaining, so I definitely recommend it. Another fine episode, good to walk down memory lane. You know, it's kind of fun to like not have to go back and watch the whole entire Raw, you know, or the whole entire pay-per-view and just see little brief clips. It's enjoyable to me. It's just something I like. So let me know what you thought in the comments below, guys. If you finished watching the episode, if you've watched already, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bells to get all notifications when I post all my new videos. I want to thank all my patrons for your continued support. And thanks again, guys. I'll see you next time.